Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of Diplo Strats. Today, joining me, I have a content creator you may well be familiar with. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, folks. I'm Floridaman from Floridaman Diplomacy.
Yes, and Floridaman Diplomacy, I mean, if you haven't seen it before, you should check it out. It's a fantastic source of strategy. A lot more to the point than our videos, I think. Yours tend to come in about 20 minutes, is that right?
That's about right. I'd say that's the average.
Yes, and another thing to mention here, you are very, very close to 1,000 subscribers right now. So if anyone really wants to check out that strategy, make sure to hit the subscribe button while you're over there. Now, I have dragged you away from your home site of PlayDiplomacy for a game here to play a game of Blitz over on WebDiplomacy. So this was a 5-minute per phase game. We were both in last Saturday, I think. No, it was probably
Was
sooner.
it that far back? I thought it was Tuesday.
It was probably Tuesday. Yes, that sounds about right. And obviously, it's a pretty different experience to your usual game. You've played a 5-minute phase game before. I know this because I've seen your backstabber video on it, and it was a pretty sad affair with a lot of CDs. I'm hoping this one improved your view on the variants a little bit. Is that the case or not?
Yes, I think this Blitz was better than my last Blitz style game, although I will say it might be better if you're actually blitzed.
Yeah. And honestly, well, I guess we shall jump into the game on that note. I'll get it playing here. You'll be able to see my press in the corner. This is recorded from my perspective. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the press that was going on with Floridaman outside of the press that came to me, of course. So let's talk about it a bit. How did the opening go for you? Do you think in terms of the press?
Well, in terms of the press, I would say it was not an outstanding start because while I had what seemed like a fairly decent rapport with both England and Russia, they were both asking for different things from me, and I had very little rapport with France. France wasn't super receptive to my any overtures I may have made, and wasn't making any overtures to me. Was mostly just interested in a bounce in Burgundy, which I reluctantly agreed to when he asked at the last minute, although I was not very happy about it because I was hoping I could move toward Roer and maybe have a shot at deciding who got Belgium. Um, so I kind of resolved that I would probably work with England because of the way that France was communicating to me.
Are you not
Unfortunately,
not a fan of the Burgundy bounce in general? Then
not if I'm Germany, but also not in general, actually. Yeah, I don't usually find it necessary. I think if you move to Burgundy as France, that's a little aggressive, and if you move to Burgundy as Germany, that's usually really aggressive. But if you're bouncing, it just means you don't trust each other, which is fine, but it's not a positive thing, I don't think.
yeah, and of course it meant that neither of you had any power on Belgium in this full phase, right? But if you were planning to work with England, I guess that might be okay. I assume you just said, go ahead, take it with a convoy.
I didn't really say anything about it, to be honest. I was planning to work with England mainly just because of how things had gone with France. In the 5 minute turns, I didn't have a good chance for really subtle diplomacy, but I, after the way France behaved in spring, I was wanting to work with England because I barely spoke to France. And then in fall, he demands another bounce in Burgundy.
Oh boy. I guess that also prevents you from being able to build in Munich. Like, that seems just really restrictive of both of your powers at that point.
Yes, very restrictive, very annoying. This starts my pretty much game long feeling of annoyance at France.
Yep. This is definitely something that continues. In the south, I think I had a But even more annoying neighbor potentially with that Austrian move into Adriatic. I attempted to resolve it by saying that they should convoy me over to Albania, but it did not end up working out very well for me because they entered a hold instead. So I should have moved to Trieste maybe and gone after Austria immediately. But hey, I'm Italy, so I'm a pretty defensive power regardless. I suppose I can probably survive this. Here we go into the builds. You've gained Denmark, you've gained Holland, and you've bounced Russia out of Sweden. I assume the bounce out of Sweden is because you want to work with England, right?
That's right. And England insisted on it. In fact, I wanted to let Russia into Sweden before I had that dialogue with England. But given that France was hostile to me, I rationalized that I would end up being hostile to Russia anyway because England Germany is pretty much the biggest problem for Russia in the long term. I think.
Yeah. I think I'm always a bit nervous about bouncing Russia out of Sweden, even if I'm attempting to attack them, just because when they're in Bothnia, really the only place they like going is to Baltic, right? Unless they're going back to St. Petersburg. So obviously you had to build a fleet coming into here, right?
You know, again, I really didn't want to fight Russia. I actually had told Russia that I was going to bounce him. I told him why. I told him it's because I want to work with England. I said basically no hard feelings. And I didn't think he had any hard feelings either. And I was thinking I would really like to go and fight France now. But then England was, insisting that I should build a fleet. So I said, all right, I'll build a fleet. I don't think it's necessary, but there you see, I did. Um,
Yep. Uh, do you generally prefer to build armies when you're going against France? Then I would usually just build one fleet regardless for safety.
I think of building a fleet, if you're Germany, as being a provocation toward England generally. So I mean, I don't really see what the use of it against France would have been most likely, because if England had built properly in an anti-French way, if he had built a fleet in Liverpool and or possibly a fleet in London, then we certainly wouldn't need any fleets I could build, I don't think. But um, I know a lot of Germany's will build a fleet in 1901 builds, no matter who they're working with. I usually consider that a provocation if I'm England.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got another build possible in the future, I suppose it's not giving up as much because you always have the potential to put that fleet down later. I just find that if you try and build the fleet later, it's more of a provocation almost. This is like your best excuse to. Um, but
I
yeah,
think of it as an excuse to as well. If I'm England, I'm thinking you just made an excuse to build a fleet. You didn't need one.
yeah, that's very fair indeed. But this England definitely screwed you over, and if I recall correctly, they screw you over quite hard in this coming phase, right?
Yes. I knew he was going to screw me over as soon as I saw he built a fleet in Edinburgh.
Yeah, and of course, Army London is not what you build if you want to go to war with France, right?
Right. Army London, Fleet Edinburgh for the fight with France.
Yep. But you actually end up in a. Well, I don't know that it's a good position having French in rear and the English in Holland, but somehow you're in Burgundy and in Belgium after this turn, which is a really interesting position and quite a tough one, I think.
Well, since they made it obvious that they were both attacking me, France by building only armies, and England by building in a way that was hostile only toward either me and or Russia when I wanted us to fight France, I had no choice but to try and go on the offensive, and this was the result.
Yep. And yeah, it's kind of hard to see where you go from here, though. And looking at it at this point, I mean, the army in Prussia is even more painful, right? The Russian coming at you, I assume to try and nab Berlin. But also the
Yeah.
fact that you had to build that fleet in '02 means that you've got a unit that can't really be used to protect you in your home supply centers, which, yeah, the army would have been much better for the defense.
I think you make a very good point.
Yeah.
The English really tricked me here.
Yeah, and then kind of gave it away instantly, which was a little surprising, I think. But so, what's your when you're looking at this position, you're just thinking, "Oh God, there's English in Holland, French in Russians in Prussia." I think a lot of diplomacy players, even good diplomacy players, just go, "Oh God, I'm screwed. I guess I'll just like maybe even give up at this point." What was your approach to this situation?
Well, some diplomacy players would probably feel like giving up even in your position with a juggernaut absorbing Austria next to you and seemingly and you're still on four. But I never almost never I should say give up. My approach to this situation is well, it reminds me of that old joke about the folks who are on the island with the people who want to cannibalize them and skin them and make their skin into a canoe, you know? And the one guy, because he doesn't want to let things go their way, he starts stabbing himself all over. He says, "Screw your canoe." Um, so my point is that even if I'm on the brink of death, I will at least inflict as much pain as possible on the people who have brought me to that point. And what we're seeing here is that there's a little bit of a diplomatic reversal, I would say, because the French who were working with the English are now positioned in a way that they might become hostile to them. The English are committed against the Russians, and I am in sort of a neutral position at this point because the Russians and the Turks are growing, well, especially the Russians really, are growing so quickly because the Austrians collapsed so quickly. So something has thrown the board into chaos, and when you're in a bad position, chaos is to your advantage.
Absolutely. And like just looking at this position now, it's so much better than the position on the turn before. You've got five centres all clumped together. That English unit that was in Holland is gone. French unit in Ruhr is gone. It vacated out to Belgium. Was that the result of your diplomacy, or did France just decide to stab here?
I think it was partially I'm not sure. I'm reluctant to take credit for this because I'm not entirely sure. It's either it might be partially because of my diplomacy. I think the fact that England is no longer attacking me is because of my diplomacy, for sure. But I'm I think I'm sounding the alarm about Russia here, and I think that France is actually not listening to me and not listening to England either because I'm trying to get us all on the same page and sort of get a belated Western triple started.
Yep, I think I remember you telling me you were going to try and get a Western Triple started, and of course, as Italy, I'm thinking, oh god, I really don't want that, because that means French fleets will probably be coming into the Mediterranean, right? But so I was quite glad to see that France was not accepting that. But I do also remember you saying, yeah, the Russian is getting super strong, and I was looking at this position just thinking, yup, Russia in Vienna and Budapest and Romania at the end of 1903, that seems fairly strong to me. uh, so definitely something to worry about. Given that you're just on the five there, though, when France turns down the Western Triple, which I assume they did, like, they just outright said that to you. What's your plan from there? Are you just going to try and work with the Russian, maybe, or are you still going to try and oppose them?
Well, France basically told me what we should do is just knock out England as fast as possible, and then we could fight Russia together. And I was uninterested in that because I was uninterested in being squeezed between Russia and France. So my plan was still to oppose both Russia and France as much as possible at this point. And I did I miss a season or something? Oh no, this is the retreat phase. Um,
Yeah.
so my plan is to oppose both Russia and France as much as I can, and try and either force this Western Triple that I was insisting on to happen, or at least keep France from dominating for long enough that he has no choice but to keep me alive as a shield against Russia. So my plan is to stay alive and hold out until conditions improve in some way, which seems unlikely, but I don't have a lot of offensive power to work with. France has a fortified border with me. I don't want to go after England for the reasons I've already mentioned, so this kind of defensive stance is all I've really got.
Yeah, sometimes holding on the defense can definitely be the right move. It's something I find really tough to do, just because I always like to be growing a bit, and that's obviously a massive problem in some situations where you attack someone and then destabilize the board, and then the biggest power gets even bigger, right? So sometimes you do just want to stay on the defensive. One of the nice things about Germany is this position with Holland, Ruhr, Munich, sometimes with Belgium, Ruhr, Munich even, but here particularly this one, can just hold out forever as long as France doesn't get a unit into the North Sea. So keeping England on side is going to be huge for you here. I noticed that you supported England into Sweden on that turn. I think we're in the retreats phase now. I do
Yeah.
remember something interesting here. I'm not sure whether I should talk about that until the next phase, actually. Let's wait until the next phase.
All right.
Yeah.
What are you thinking down south at this point?
Oh boy, I was thinking I really want to get a center at some point because I'm still on four. My two neighbors are huge, right? I've been trying to prop up Austria because I really wanted to stop this juggernaut, but at this point, I think Austria leaves the game, or very shortly after this. Uh,
Austria said, I have to go have dinner.
yeah,
I
this is the
think
problem with the Blitz games currently is that we're kind of like fishing for anyone who can show up to them.
I was going to
And
say, I think Austria might be one of the people who joined at the last minute when we couldn't find someone. So I'm not holding as much of a grudge against Austria for jumping out so suddenly. Plus, that was Austria with like one center left that didn't have a unit in it.
yeah, they could feasibly have survived this year, I think, but it seemed fairly unlikely. So at that point, we just said, yeah, go ahead and go to dinner. I guess we can just you can just let your country go into CD because it's only one unit. So the Austria's going into civil disorder. I think we just got the advance here where they have just gone into civil disorder. I'm thinking, how am I going to get my supply centers here? I guess I can jump in against France, especially if you were in that line against France, potentially able to cut Burgundy. But I think later in the phase I reconsider that. I just think if I go against France right now, France is getting a build from Liverpool, so they're probably going to use that defensively against me. So there you can see I changed my orders to going for Trieste instead. So instead I'm just trying to pitch Turkey about how Russia is the most dangerous power on the board, and Russia about how Turkey is the most dangerous power on the board, and see if that will work to turn them against one another. And
I
I.
remember this phase. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I remember this phase. I think it was this phase. You actually asked me if I thought that Russia would support Turkey into Trieste, and and I did. So yeah, there's the press is actually on the screen right now. But I think I should have encouraged you actually in this idea of attacking France right now because you had a little time, it seems, and there's no way you were ever going to get Trieste unless Russia just massively screwed up. If you're doing Juggernaut, I would say this position is not the time to turn on your ally or stop supporting him because Russia has been so successful so far. All that Russia really needs to do is keep Turkey on side, and this should be a Russian win in the end. Like there have been so many games I've played I'm in the same position Russians in now, virtually, and you just need to keep pushing in the same direction you're already going, and you'll win.
Yeah, the Juggernaut can be super strong in that. The only thing that would give me pauses to that as Russia is just the fact I've been knocked out of Sweden in the north, which kind of means it's difficult to advance too much further up there. You're gonna have to ram all of those armies into Germany to make any progress at all, and that's just quite tough to do. Except, of course, this was the thing I wanted to discuss earlier. England tries to tap Baltic Sea and accidentally walks out of Sweden, so Russia ends up getting a build regardless. Which,
Yeah.
yeah, that must have been
Original
painful to see.
Originally, I was going to support my unit in Berlin to hold because I was paranoid about being attacked by Russia, and um, and England convinced me to do something different, and so none of our defensive ideas were successful at all here, and it's kind of funny because it really messes us both up. Because I lose a home center, England loses the center he was about to gain. He was gonna build a unit in Edinburgh so he could retake Liverpool from France. So this was going to be a pivotal season for us working together, and instead, it's a season that sets us both back pretty badly.
Yeah, that's so painful. And of course, he's just got one random fleet out in the Barents now that can't really do very much because he's got a disband, even, I think. So,
He
yeah.
does have a disband, so he has to pick either Baltic or Barents. I don't know which one he's going to pick, but he I mean I'm trying to remember, I don't recall. I feel like he should keep the Baltic fleet, but I don't really remember. Um
I guess we'll
and
see.
yeah, we'll see very shortly. Um
I
but
should.
I am getting pretty nervous here. I'm squeezed between a Frenchman and a Russian, so
Yeah. I should say accidentally ended up in Aegean that turn. I was tapping it so that the Turk couldn't rotate to Eastern Mediterranean and Aegean at the same time, and the Turk decided to jump into Black Sea instead and attack the Russian, which was just perfect for me. And of course, the Russian let me into Trieste as well, which I would agree with you was probably a bad idea on their part. Mainly because I was saying I'll help you against the Turk if you let me get Trieste, if I recall correctly. So they were just like, I guess that's a good backup option.
Russia got too greedy.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things in diplomacy, right? Even when you're huge, you can't ease up too much. You can't like get too lazy or greedy because when you're huge, you just put a bigger target on your back, and then it's more likely that people align against you. So yeah, and here's the turn where I decide to go west. I mean, I guess this was probably a very nice thing for you to hear, given what's just happened to the English player and you know the French getting very strong up there.
Yeah, I'm not unhappy about this. I'm the thing I'm really happy about is the fact that Turkey's just turned on Russia, which changes the dynamic of the game completely because, Russia was obviously putting a lot of pressure on me and on England as well, although we will see how long my friendship with England lasts. Um, but I am also happy to see you approaching France because I do kind of blame France for some of what's going wrong. He's never actually tried to work with me in this game. He's just trying to go for dots as quickly as he can get them, which that's one way of playing diplomacy, but it's not particularly subtle or clever. He's not really trying to work with anybody. He's just invading things, and he happens to have a strong enough position that he can sort of do that.
Yep. That's definitely something that happens a lot with the Juggernaut, right? If the Juggernaut is going strong, then France is almost by default going to be strong as well, because the Juggernaut tends to roll over the same people that France is competing with. So you can see France is now in Wales. They have a guarantee of London. They do get a forced disband in Belgium due to some nice moves from you there, but they're still making progress. outside of the fact that they're about to lose Marseille.
Yes, the French are sort of making progress, at least enough to convince them to continue what they're doing, because I believe that France is going to keep on trying to punch everything that he can reach and focus on attacking rather than ever thinking about homeland defense for a while. And to be honest, I found the French players' methods pretty rational for much of the game, but he's he's just going for the gold that he thinks he sees.
Yep. This can definitely happen when you get very focused on on gaining supply centers and then forget that you can lose them as well. I think I was constantly talking to the French and saying, "Hey, look, I'm just trying to take Marseille here. I'm not going to take anything else." Which, as you can see from my moveset here, is like blatantly a lie.
Do you think you believe that?
I don't know. I The thing is, like, as France, I would 100% move English Channel back to Mid Atlantic here and try and negotiate some kind of alliance either with you or England. Probably with you, because England, I think, is easier to attack for France here.
He was actually trying to get me to attack Italy at this point, but
I think
which
he
is
should have been trying to get you to attack Berlin, right? And just take your centers back from Russia and then maybe build a fleet and go for England with him.
that would have made sense. But he wasn't doing that. He was trying to get me to attack you because you were moving in on him,
Yeah.
and I was just like, that sounds perfect. You just back away from my homeland, and I'll take Berlin back, and then I'll attack Italy, and we'll be square. And I'm just hoping that France will be foolish enough to actually believe me and pull back and leave me alone so that I can recuperate enough to give him a punch in the jaw alongside you.
Yep. Uh, if I recall correctly, that doesn't actually happen though. France is just like very well. There we see it. They go in and tap Kiel even, which is I don't know why they would do that. I think I remarked at the time that this just felt like a really bad move because all it does is annoy you, right?
France is just a stupid aggressive player, I think. I mean, I'm not saying he's stupid. I'm saying he's being aggressive to a stupid degree. I don't understand it either. I mean, he's I feel like he's hostile to me without any reason. I've never done anything to him in this game. I haven't had the chance, other than the I took Belgium, but we'll see how long-lived that is.
Yep. I mean, you are back on 5 supply centers somehow, despite having units everywhere around you still. But you can't build that 5th unit, unfortunately, primarily because France tapped Kiel. And of course, we see here the English have finally managed to establish themselves in the north. They managed to take Norway and Sweden off the Russian, finally.
Oh,
And
yes, I wish they had failed.
yeah, I remember this being a bit of a problem for you going forward. Did you think you still had England on side at this point?
Yes, and I was like, this is great. We can make progress against Russia and France together. We're finally having some victories. Russia's strength in the north isn't that great. France is being invaded from the south, so his attention's going to be pulled away to Italy. And England's like, oh yeah, sure, sure, sure.
Yep. We'll see where that heads in a second. I am interested. So, in the last turn, we did see the Russian move out of Cilicia, move out of Bohemia, and basically go in to attack me instead in Tyrolia. Was that in part due to your negotiations with them? Did you manage to convince them to back out like that?
I think it was, yes. I remember I had proposed to Russia that if he would back off of me and just fight his own enemies, that I would at least wait a little while before I retook Berlin.
Right. And then
And I was lying. I think I immediately tried to retake Berlin, but I also figured that, it's German. Berlin is German. He should accept that and just destroy that fleet if I take it. And I'm not going to try and take any other Russian territory. So in a way, I'm lying, but it's a lie in the direction of the truth.
Yes. I mean, I think it's absolutely fair, that kind of lie. At this point, if I'm Russia, I just go, okay, fair. I guess you want Berlin back. That's kind of reasonable. Um,
I'm
but
a very reasonable guy.
yep. But then what you see here, this is the real problem with England not moving a unit back to Mid-Atlantic Ocean, right? Because France now has nothing on Spain, nothing on Portugal. So I can bounce France out of Mid-Atlantic, go into Spain, and then take Portugal on the following phase. I think I also, yeah, I did offer to support Belgium out to Burgundy, which I think you immediately took here because Belgium probably gets forced disbanded otherwise, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did accept that. I know I messaged you to say I accepted. I think I also actually entered the move, because I want to be a part of the dismantling of France. I don't really want to get my units destroyed for no reason. And, you know, I the French they had the second biggest rise of any power on this map, and they're going to have the hardest fall, I think, because of this style of play that just disregards both the tactical situation in terms of defense and also the relationships with the neighbors, because his relationships with both me and England should be ruined by everything he's done so far, and the fact that he just doesn't cooperate at all, doesn't listen at all, just does whatever he feels like he can get away with in the moment. I know these are 5-minute turns, but he's acting like these decisions are made in 10 seconds.
Yep, that's very fair. Now, there's a. Here, this is the moment I really want to talk about, right? So, you ask me, could you do me a favor, please? Certainly, what do you want me to do was my response. Maybe a moment before I switch back to that tab. But the thing you requested of me here was, can you vacate Marseille and let me in from Burgundy? And that was, for the moment, like when I was looking at this, at first I just went, no, I want a supply center. I was just thinking about it a bit more. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, a strong Germany does advantage me. You're fighting England, you're fighting Russia, you're fighting France, and France is obviously my biggest opponent right now. All of these kind of benefit me in the long run. Uh, how quickly did you think of doing this? And, like, did you think it would work?
Well, we played with 5-minute turns, so I thought of it really fast. I did think of it like very shortly before you very shortly after this past season processed, and I was just thinking, you and I have the same enemies. I am in really serious trouble. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'm gonna try it, and maybe Italy will see the bigger picture. What I would say is the bigger picture, and let me in here and let me stay on as many units as possible because then I can help with the conquest of France, which you know I'm motivated to do.
Yep, absolutely. I was well aware of you not liking France very much by this point. Um,
I may have said some uncharitable things.
yes. So I think I do enter it here, yeah, Marseille into Spain and let you into to Marseille. So looking at that position there, I guess, did you anticipate keeping Marseille for a while, or were you thinking it's like a very temporary borrow situation?
I was thinking that there were a couple of possible ways this could go. This could be a very temporary borrow to the point where you just force me out the next year or something because you decide you want an extra unit. Or it could be temporary in the sense that as soon as I recover enough, I grab another center or something from France or England that I consent to giving it back to you. Or, and this is always in my optimist's heart, I'm thinking maybe I'm about to bounce back. Maybe I'm about to blow up to 8 centers. Maybe I'm going to absorb Scandinavia, get Berlin back, take Belgium and Paris. Maybe Marseille will be permanently German. You know, I always maintain this is why I never give up, or almost never give up, is I always maintain this almost delusional sense of self-confidence that I could turn things around. It's a good thing I never became a gambler.
I mean, hey, you are still very much in the game, so this is probably your lowest point in the game, even. And actually, you managed to retain Denmark despite having England attacking it, which is huge. So you end up being on 4 still, despite having all of these people attacking you and all of these units around you. Uh, so
The English. The English here are worse than the French. I'm talking to him about all these plans we can work on together, and all he's doing is just repeatedly trying to take Denmark. I, he could have taken St. Petersburg. He could have retaken some of his home centers by now. He's made just no effort at doing anything except for trying to take Denmark. I don't want Sweden from him. Or I hadn't wanted Sweden from him. Now I'm thinking if I have the chance, I'll take Sweden from him. But I hadn't been thinking my next target is England. But now I'm thinking England is the only person who I am beginning to want to destroy more than France. And that was a hard road that he pulled me down, but he got me there.
Yep, you had some very stabby neighbors in this game. I think like this was maybe where I got the main edge over your side of the board. Was that on my side of the board, I felt like I was the only person who was incredibly stabby. I kept flipping between Russia and Turkey, whereas on your side of the board, it felt like everyone was constantly stabbing you. uh,
Not only that, but England kept insisting that the build decision he made in 1901 was not an indicator of a stab coming.
that's
He kept insisting that no, like we both stabbed each other at the same time, bro. And I was just like, this person is just dishonest to his core. Like he can't even have an honest conversation. It's impossible for me to even have a real exchange with him because he's just putting out propaganda.
Yep. Well, that seems to be the new way to do it, right? After all the current political issues. But anyway, we have so we have now England in North Sea and Sweden. They are presumably going to make another attempt on Denmark. They can force it if they so wish. At this
Only
point,
if he wants. Sorry.
sorry, at this point, are you trying to negotiate with him to get him to not do that, or have you given up?
I tried to do it for. I tried to negotiate with him for like a couple of years while he was doing that, but at this point, I've given up. And it's because I don't want to talk to him. He's unpleasant. It's unpleasant for me to have a dialogue with him when he's being dishonest about the past, he's being dishonest about the future, he's being dishonest about the present. Talking to him, it's like talking to a snake. Like, he has a forked tongue. This guy, anything he says, I just have no way of knowing whether it will be true or false. So I just feel like he will say whatever he needs to say in order to try and lower my guard. So I'm uninterested in working with him. I tell him so. I tell him I will never support you again in the future, and like I'm just going to work against you in whatever way I can. Because sometimes you have to be honest with people.
Yep. Oh, perfect. Something I did want to ask here, so you have the potential to attack Holland, you have the potential to attack Berlin. Now, Russia's not really been doing much to you. Well, I say that just as Russia supports France into Kiel. But prior to that, were you considering knocking Russia out of Berlin, or had you tried to, like, piece Russia out at this point?
I thought Russia and I were good. I thought we had reached an understanding. Like, after the first time that I tried to take Berlin, right after he vacated the area around it and I failed, I said, okay, I'm not going to try again. And he said, okay, don't try it again. And I didn't. And now,
Yep.
now they really do bring me to my low point, because now I actually am losing the majority of my home centers to this joint attack of nonsense. This I could not understand why Russia was supporting France into Berlin, because I hadn't really been hostile to Russia. France had done nothing for him, and but of course, I understand rationally in retrospect, not having only 5 minutes to think about it. I understand why he did it. It's because it increased the security of his unit in Berlin. It made it less likely it would be dislodged. So it was a rational calculation. And I can respect the Russian decision to do that much more than I respect the French decision to continue attacking me and trying to defend the English centers he had occupied rather than defending any of his home centers.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty happy seeing him not defending his home centers very much. But I think here you actually do manage to pick up Paris as well. So despite I mean, you do actually make a gain out of the fact that the French didn't defend their home supply centers incredibly well.
Didn't I mean I don't want to say anything negative about your skill here, but I would almost say that the French didn't defend their home centers at all.
Yep.
I
Certainly
I
down in the
think
south.
I think he does start though defending like you're saying. I think he does start defending once you're at Brest. He starts to he leaves London behind, leaves that to England, and I think he and England have sort of a settlement agreed here where they're not going to fight each other and France is going to focus on you. So I think France is thinking, strategically probably for the best if I don't let Italy invade me completely and absorb me into his empire. And so for once, France is behaving sort of sensibly, although it's much too late.
Yep.
Like he's never going to get that stuff back.
Yeah, I mean, it's super tough to break the south when you've only got two fleets and one of them is kind of pinned in Liverpool. I did want to ask as well. I think the phase before this, I actually asked you to move Marseille up to Burgundy, and you ended up moving Munich into Burgundy instead. Was that an honest mistake, or was that a? I think I'd prefer to keep this unit here and defend.
It's hard to say. I'm not sure. It was probably an honest mistake. You know me. I think I said this. I'm an honest and trustworthy guy.
Absolutely, in all circumstances, I'm sure. Uh, I should say you are still on four supply centers. How you managed to get Kiel back as well in that phase? You do lose Denmark finally to the English player because you have to defend Kiel. But throughout all of this, I think this game you've been steady on 4 or 5 for the entire thing, if I'm correct on that. That's
Yeah, I think there was. I think there. Yeah, I think there may have been a moment when I was reduced to three, but I think pretty much through this whole game I've been steady on 4 or 5. Partially because, frankly, of you, but I don't mind that the result was achieved that way because I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. And you're not even a stranger, really. You're my friendly neighbor.
indeed. I mean, it was due to your negotiation, right? That's the important thing to note here. If you can get someone to donate you a center, that's still a diplomatic achievement. It's not getting someone to be generous like that. And I think in this circumstance, it was because you pointed out that this is better for me than keeping Marseille would have been, because then I just build another unit at home and it doesn't really do anything, right? Whereas here, I was absolutely thrilled with the fact that you were constantly taking France down by one, going into Paris, right? Making my job a bit easier, taking Brest and such.
I was glad to be working with you because I was also, even if my position isn't really improving much, even if I'm staying just barely staying constant, I'm deriving a lot of psychological satisfaction from being the person who helps you take France and ideally England down.
Yep. I think at this point, I did have some thoughts of, yeah, I really hope I can get up against England, but with a 1910 time limit, and just the fact that England's kind of got no real opposition in the north, it seemed really tough to take any English centres here. Um,
Until you mentioned it, I didn't realize these games ended in 1910.
Yep, I think I forgot to mention that when I invited you to it in the first place. But that's an important part of Blitz, at least on Nexus, is that the games don't go on too long to try and attract more attention, and get people to be able to play them without having to go off to have dinner and do other such things.
It makes a lot of sense. And England had actually mentioned something about like he wanted to do something a certain way because of the time limit, or maybe it was France. And I just sort of disregarded it because they didn't mention a specific time limit. I was thinking, I guess they mean that after a few hours we're going to stop playing, but I didn't realize there was a limit in the number of seasons. I thought it was a we'll all go to bed at some point.
Do you think you'd have played differently if you knew that the game ended in 1910 here?
Not by much. I was being attacked for most of the game by both of my main neighbors, and actually, I was being attacked by all three of my neighbors for most of the game by England, France, and Russia. So most of my most of my most of my tactics were defensive in nature anyway, and that wouldn't have changed. Maybe my negotiations would have been a little different, but I can't say that I really would have been much more convincing because the French were very short-sighted. We're not really thinking more than a season ahead, I think. And the English were very, very stabby because they were only thinking, I think, in terms of that deadline and immediate gains. And that's why they gave up the possibility of working with me at some point in order to keep trying to grab that one center of Denmark that had no prospect of leading to any other gains, but it was just one more dot they could add to their total.
Yep. Did you? So you do actually have the potential of retaking Denmark here if you move either Kiel up to Helgoland or Kiel up to Baltic and then manage to get Munich into Kiel behind. Was that something you were considering at all? Or were you maybe more focused on Berlin here?
I was considering it. It seemed pretty risky because I felt there was a high probability of basically of this. Well, not of this, but what just happened was me trying to attack Berlin and England cutting my support. I felt there was a high likelihood of Russia and England cooperating. And here they actually do start cooperating, I think. Um, so I was concerned about that, and so I thought my first priority is to get rid of that Berlin unit because then I can safely try to retake Denmark.
Yep. Then I think that's very fair. But in the meantime, we now see that French unit coming up to Holland as well, which means you can't really catch a break in this game with your home supply centers because now you've got three potentially enemy units all around. Were you still trying to negotiate with any of these powers at this point?
I I don't think I was. I think I was I'd given up on England for sure by now. I was very annoyed at him and wanted to try and spite him in any way possible. I was so annoyed with him as to be no longer able to conduct diplomacy with him, I would say. And that does sometimes happen to me. I become too emotionally invested in the events of the game. But also, I don't think England would have listened to anything I had to say. And France had shown he was unwilling to listen to anything anyone had to say in the long term because he would always just go after whatever the low hanging fruit was at the moment. Whereas Russia, I didn't feel I could negotiate with Russia because anything I said to him would probably be a lie, and he would know it. Because I would only be trying to argue that I wasn't going to take Berlin or something to that effect. And he had seen repeatedly that I was trying to retake Berlin, so I didn't feel like it would make any sense to just insult his intelligence by pretending as if he might believe it.
Did
So
you consider maybe trying to get him to push up into Baltic and replace Berlin with one of the Scandinavian centres? Or was that just he wouldn't give up a safe centre for that?
I didn't. come up with that idea, and I don't think he would have. I don't think it would have made much sense for him because I think he'd have a shot at getting a Scandinavian center, but right now he has the certainty that he is currently holding Berlin, and if France and England are on his side, which they are, then he can hold Berlin forever. And he has no reason to expect he should ever fail to hold out in Berlin unless I just start to attack in some different way that disregards the safety of my other units. On the bright side, even without being able to successfully retake Berlin, I am on 5 here, so
Yeah.
I'm at least doing better than the French at this point, who are reaping the rewards for their general short-sightedness and are now only on Holland and nothing else because the English, who they turned their backs to, have retaken Liverpool, and the Italians, who they failed to fight when they had the opportunity, have now taken everything else. Whereas they did get, they were successful in striking me while my back was turned in Holland and taking that, even though they didn't manage to hold on to Belgium, which is much closer to their homeland, or to retake Paris, which was feasible for a while, I think, before they decided to abandon that and send that army east.
Yeah. I should say, I do see a reality in which this French play style does pay off, specifically if the Juggernaut isn't broken up. If Turkey sticks with Russia and they just keep pushing, then I think a hyper aggressive France does work really well because they can just kind of take advantage of the fact that everyone else is pointing the other way. Problem, of course, with that is if the Russia and the Turkey just stick together permanently and keep going against the France, France ends up losing to that because it ends
Yeah.
up being 2 versus 1, right?
Yeah, I've seen that happen in so many games where I'm Russia. And I always encourage France to see me as an ally when I'm doing the Juggernaut. Like, oh yeah, you're my third partner on the other side of the map. Could you just help me get a couple of English centers? And usually that's how I get my solos is Russia. So when I play as France, even if Russia and Turkey seem very friendly, I'm pretty leery of that, and I would be either siding with England or siding with Germany and trying to prop them up as an opponent to Russia in the north so that I can take whatever gains I can get up there, but then I can go down south, I can fight Turkey. I can be fairly assured that Russia's progress won't be too rapid in the north because I think like yes, you can be lucky as France and that can work out well, but the ideal is to hold back the other big powers from growing as much as you are, no matter which country you're playing, and not to rely on hoping that the really successful juggernaut will want to include you as their third partner at the end.
Yeah. I tend to follow a very similar philosophy. So something I've been doing in the East in this game is constantly flipping back between Russia and Turkey. I don't think that's something that works all that often. If you have people who coordinate a little better than this Russia and Turkey did, they will just see. In fact, here they do actually start doing that, and Russia supports Turkey into Serbia and knocks me out. But if you can keep two very strong powers at odds while you slowly grow, that's usually better than just siding with one of them and letting them grow at the same rate that you do. Because
Oh,
if you do
agreed.
that, yeah, then they end up being very strong.
In the games where I feel most impressed with my diplomacy, it's the games where I've managed to do something akin to that. Because if you can keep two strong powers at odds with each other, I mean, if you're a little power, you're basically dictating to these two strong powers what they're going to do, whether they're not usually fully conscious of it if you're successful. If you're doing that, then you are showing some diplomatic mastery, some really skillful manipulation that I think you should just never. I think that can't be overstated how impressive and cool that is.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I managed it alright in this one. And I think Turkey actually decides to accept my support here and keep attacking Russia when I offer them Budapest in return for walking out of Serbia. Um, well, I mean, in return for them walking out of Serbia is not much of a deal. But I think they were thinking they can make more gains against Russia if they keep pushing north. Um, but looking at the north right here, I think the north ends up getting really chaotic for you around this phase with Russia in Kiel, with France's last unit managing to walk into Paris, and with England retreating to Belgium. What were you thinking here?
First of all, getting chaotic.
Okay, that's very fair. It got even more chaotic, I should say.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking, what a mess this is. Why haven't I been able to fix this? And so as for Paris, actually, I should say I let France have Paris, and that's because he had repeatedly well, he had been repeatedly asking me for help, acting like he couldn't understand why I wasn't giving it to him. And even though I knew he was just a complete opportunist, I thought this whole time I've been really trying to hold on to my own home centers and be able to finish with them, finish strong with those home centers. And I felt that even though I had been really ticked off at the French earlier, and even though he had been nothing but disloyal toward me in the times when I tried to work with him and just kept dot grabbing at every chance he got, I wanted him to be able to die with Paris.
I mean, hey, that's very honourable on that front. Um,
I'm a little too nice for my own good sometimes.
I think
Because that's
on
how I
this
get down to three centers here.
Yep, on this phase, I was a little not well. I was very not nice. I actually genuinely did miscount centers here. I forgot that France was taking Paris off you, so I thought I can just go in and nick Marseille, right? And it shouldn't mess him up too much. And I think it ends up messing you up massively because one unit is a huge difference when you're on 3 versus 4. I assume you'd agree with that.
Usually, but I don't think it messes me up too badly here because I well, first of all, because you're going to get me back into Paris, I think. And second, because my position was never going to be that great here with English fleets in Denmark and Holland and a Russian fleet in Kiel. It's just it's dependent on luck whether or not I'd be able to make a comeback from here, at least in part. And again, what I'm most enthusiastic about and interested in is seeing you overcome England. So really the only thing I'm unhappy about is that you're going to have to waste the moves of your fleets in trying to help me retake Paris and protect Brest. And I hadn't really thought too much about the fact that France would probably try to go for Brest after he got Paris back, because I was thinking France will be satisfied with that. France should be grateful for that. He should understand that that's all he should feel like he's going to get. And, I actually proposed to France maybe we could put him into Gascony and then you convoy him onto the English island. I think it would be funny if he ends up in Wales. I said something to that effect to him. I didn't have time to propose it to you, though. And so we end up going into this place where we're hostile toward France again, when I was thinking we could maybe use that last unit of his as a weapon against the English.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if he had gone to Gascony, I would totally have done that convoy. I think it would have.
He would have done it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's on the one center, so he's not exactly. He doesn't exactly have a ton to lose right now.
Yeah, he does actually try and enter it there, but yes, I was not aware that that was a thing that was a possibility. So I just go in with your support instead.
Whenever France communicated to me, it was always last minute, so I think my proposal to him was also last minute. So that's why I didn't have enough time to tell you about it.
Yeah. That's certainly a bit of a problem with getting used to Blitz, I think. In that, obviously, with standard diplomacy, you have so much time to talk to people. Even with face-to-face diplomacy, you tend to have like 15 minutes at least. In this, it really is like you need to do everything as fast as you possibly can, especially if I think I have a slight advantage in that I've learned to type pretty fast. If you're not as fast a typist, then this variant is really hard. I don't know if like you consider yourself to be a fast typist or not. Do you think that affected it at all?
I think I'm a decent enough typist in terms of my speed. I don't really think it. It might have, but I don't think it affected it very much. I think the problem I had was mostly just that my neighbors were the way they were,
Yeah.
and that I think I made a wrong decision early on about who to work with, and but I also don't know how much I could have improved it since France, by his early moves and early decisions and his 1901 build, he was obviously committed to working with England, no matter what. And so I couldn't really have chosen to side with him against England. I actually built in a way that was, theoretically could have been anti-English because I built a fleet, but I was really planning to work with England, but he built pro-French. So the only thing I could have done really differently about this, and this has nothing to do with typing, is that I could have not bounced Russia out of Sweden, and then maybe I would have had a friend there.
That was exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, I think it came. A lot of this comes down to whether you bounce Sweden or not, which is kind of absurd thinking how like early of a decision that is. But if Russia gets into Sweden, builds in St. Petersburg, and starts going against England, I think this is a totally different game. But it's
Unfortunately, I don't think it would have been like as different as I might have liked, because I think France and England would still wipe me out before Russia really made a dent in England. But
yeah, because you did manage to get England off your back pretty fast. This side, I think the main difference it would have meant was no Russian unit in Berlin/Prussia, which is pretty decent. It probably means you're still on the defensive, but yeah,
yeah,
it's a little
and
less so much.
I will say that I think that having Russia on my side would have made a difference because French were so opportunistic that maybe they would have turned on England at that point. And the Russian player was clearly like one of the better players on this map, I think. I mean, you would know better. You had more interactions with him than me, but I do feel like he was more skilled than either of my other neighbors. You obviously come out of this game looking like an absolute genius. We can see this is now 1910, and you are the dominant power on the map. So you are probably, from this game alone, looking like the most skilled player. But but either Russia or Turkey comes out looking second best, and working with Turkey wasn't really an option for me in early game.
I think Russia and Turkey were both quite good players. They were just also quite. They had a very loyalist style of play, which I think doesn't. There's different styles that work well against certain other styles, right? And my style of play tends to work really well against loyalists, just because I'm quite good at pretending that I'm one of them.
Who are they loyal to? They weren't loyal to each other.
No, but
They stabbed.
they tended to be loyal to me when I was working with them, which, yeah, that did not end up working well. Well, one of the things right at the end here, Turkey actually says, let's just not fight, let's just sit back and let's have an honorable ending to this. This was after I stabbed them. I was like, oh god. I think I'm gonna take a center off you if if I fight here, so I prefer to fight if that's alright with you, but I don't want to feel really bad by taking everything off you if you're just gonna hold there and say you're gonna be, oh, you want an honorable end.
Peace with honor.
Yeah. So I
Peace
think
without victors.
what I end up doing here is, like, in this turn, I end up positioning myself to be able to take stuff if I want to. And then I was going to, like, talk to him and say, hey, we should really fight it out here. I think I can gain a center no matter what, so let's just end this in a sort of way that feels a bit better than you just holding. But if I recall correctly, he enters moves that basically let me into everything, so I get a very good ending out of this, which also was a bit of a feel bad ending because I do not like taking centers off someone who's just like not fighting at all. uh, but yeah,
I was feeling okay about this ending too, because you see, I've finally gotten all three of my home centers back. Although, unfortunately, I I'm losing a center to England at the same time, which I'm not pleased with. But this is this is pretty close to what I was hoping for at this point, to finishing with at least my home centers intact, so that I can pretend like I made a comeback when I was besieged by all sides. The the all sides that besieged me ended up destroying themselves instead of me. France self-destructed. England didn't exactly self-destruct. I wasn't happy with how well England ended up looking, or how good England ended up looking, how well he did relatively. But Russia also kind of got destroyed. So the powers that all attacked me from the three sides, two of the three of them ended up doing worse than I did.
yeah. I think it's not pretending to have recovered at all. This is a pretty nice recovery, getting back all your home supply centers after basically. I think the entire game you were down at least one, maybe past 1903, because of that Russian unit in Berlin. Uh, I'm
I
just
like to think. Sorry.
sorry. No, go ahead.
No, you, please.
I was just looking at the chat there and seeing Turkey go dishonorable fool. I think that just made me laugh. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, like, I'm at some point I'm gonna make a video called "Diplomacy: The Art of the Comeback" or something like that, because I think that that's actually one of my best skills. Is that improbably in situations where other people expect me to fold and collapse and get rolled over, about half the time I end up bouncing back and recovering to at least a somewhat honorable position, you might say, by the end. And I, sometimes I think that my symbol shouldn't be an alligator; it should be a cockroach. Because you have to really crush me.
Yep. Oh man, I mean that is one of the best feelings in diplomacy, right? Obviously, the solo feels good, but when you get down to the knocked down to a point where you think this position is kind of unrecoverable at the start, and then you somehow manage to pull out a recovery anyway, that just it feels just as incredible, and it's kind of even more incredible in a way in that in diplomacy when you're ahead it's quite a lot easier to snowball than it is to recover when you're behind, just because the lack of units is so painful.
Strongly agree. Strongly agree. And speaking as someone who is uh, statistically a pretty good diplomacy player on Play Diplomacy, I win something like 1 in 3 or thereabouts of the games I play, so that's my solo rate. But even if you are somebody who statistically does really well at diplomacy and wins a lot of games, that still leaves the 2/3 of games or whatever that you don't win. And so you have to find other things that can satisfy you about the game. And this is one of the things that satisfies me the most, is when people were taking shots at me the whole game. I was getting a barrage of attacks from all directions. All my neighbors stabbed me repeatedly. Um, all these things happening, and I still came out looking as good as or better than all of them. You know, you're the only person. You and Turkey are the only. Well, England is technically doing better than me. If this game continued for a single season more, though, he wouldn't be, because he'd
Yeah.
be losing some centers to you, and he'd be losing Holland to me. But besides England and Turkey, you're the only power that is actually doing better than me now, because Russia is down to less than his home centers. Um, so I end up feeling pretty good about this result, even though, in practice, all that really happened for me is that I successfully survived as the Italian Janissary.
Yeah. I think it was kind of more than a janissary, because most of the time you were acting completely independent of me, right? Uh, like the whole fight in your home centers, I don't think I ever got involved in that. I don't think I was ever even adjacent to your home supply centers for most of it.
You
Um,
know, most people don't actually know how to use a janissary, and so this is usually the way I act as a janissary is completely independent.
I
I,
mean,
I
hey,
just
if it
what?
works, if it works, it works, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell if I'm in a really desperate situation where I know that somebody could kill me off if they want to, and if I haven't developed a really bad relationship with that person, I'll sometimes tell them, "Okay, you got me dead to rights. Listen, I'll help you as best I can to get the solo. You just leave me alive, and I will go forth and fight your enemies and support you into other people's centers. We can work together, and I'll help you win." And that's a compelling pitch because who doesn't want an Igor? I don't know if you've seen any like
Yeah,
parodies of well, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah. I think I vaguely do. I know I've read a lot of Terry Pratchett, and I know there's a fair few Eagles in there, so that's my main source of reference. But
Okay, that's better. That's better than any of the things I was going to reference because Terry Pratchett is much better.
God, I love Terry Pratchett. But this is so. Let's not get on a big diversion over Terry Pratchett because I could talk about that for a long time. In terms of the actual game itself, I think this was super interesting in terms of the parallel. You had two quite strong players, yourself and myself, and one of us is put in a really tough situation from the start and has to fight for survival, and the other one is kind of just doing the snowbally thing, where you take advantage of someone who's not defending well enough and get a huge runaway lead.
I mean, to be honest, like given your early position, your result is incredible here. And there have been games where I've done that, where I've been stagnant for a little bit and then snowballed and ended up being victorious. And right now I'm in a game where I was pushed to being down to two or three centers, and now I'm now I'm the board leader. But I think what you did here is extremely impressive, and honestly more impressive than what I did for sure. So I congratulations to you on a very well earned board top here. And I don't really know the rules of the Nexus League, but I hope it helps you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'll take the compliments. But yeah, the Nexus League is Sum of Squares scoring. I think it takes like your top 5 results, so I've still got a few more games to play before I get there. But this will certainly add a good result onto here. I'm just wishing I managed to take the last 2 for the solo here because I think I end on 16. But I
I
don't
was
think that
counting,
was
and
a
I believe you're
possibility.
right.
Yeah. I don't think that was a possibility. I only got to this many because Turkey didn't defend very well on the last turn. Maybe if the game continues, I get there, but yeah, not not by 1910. But yeah, it's a super fun game for me at least. Has it? So how do you feel about Blitz Press after this? Are you planning to go back to it at all, or was that your outing to it?
I will probably do this again at some point.
Glad to hear
I
that.
I don't know when, but yeah, this was frustrating, but it was also fun. So
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. I've been enjoying these a lot more than I expected to. And I should say, if anyone else wants to play, we are still looking for like people who want to show up and play because we don't tend to get to 7 most nights. So if you're looking to play Blitz Press 5 minutes per phase, there's a link to a Discord server in the video description that will take you to a server that we do that on. So go ahead and join that. But yeah, it's honestly, it's great fun. It's so much less of a time commitment than a normal game.
I love that. Honestly, I if we weren't recording this, I could play one right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, maybe we should wrap up the recording and let you go then. But But yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. And I will give one final plug here, which is, again, for your channel. Link will be in the video description. Floridaman Diplomacy, very close to 1,000 subscribers. I strongly recommend everyone here to go ahead and push you over that line, as it were.
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate it.
All right. Well,
And,
thank you. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and if any of my meager band of followers are listening, I hope that they will also, subscribe to you and follow your channel.
If they like exceedingly long banter, this is the place to be, I think. But yes, so I'll wrap it up there. Has been great to have you on, and thank you so much for playing this game with me.
Likewise, thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
All right.